Hello and welcome to our January 11th, 2023 session of the CySA Plus study session. Hopefully everyone had a good Christmas or Hanukkah or New Year's and all that good stuff. And it's time for us to get back to studying. If you want to join our live sessions on Discord, this is our Discord link here. And if you want to watch live on Twitch, this is the Twitch link. I'm Arami, and without further ado, let's get this set up and going. What kind of file holds captured network traffic from Wireshark or TCP dump? Would that be cap, pcap, netcap, or ettercap? Two of these are correct, so there are two correct answers here. What kind of file holds captured network traffic and is generated with Wireshark or TCP dump? Cap, pcap, netcap, or ettercap? If you said cap or pcap, you'd be right. Both of these are used to store packet capture data. Netcap is actually another program that can capture network data, and ettercap is a tool used to perform man-in-the-middle attacks. Starting it off easy. Which of the following are SIEM solutions? Elk, Snort, Splunk, Suricata, or Graylog? And select as many as you think in this one. Which of the following are SIEMs or SIMs? Elk, Snort, Splunk, Suricata, Graylog. If you said Elk, Splunk, and Graylog, you're right. So all three of these are SIM solutions or SIEM solutions. Snort is an IPS IDS, and Suricata is an IPS IDS and network monitoring and PCAP processing, so you could actually feed your output from Wireshark or TCP dump back through Suricata and be able to utilize those captures. Question 3. This is kind of like a PBQ almost. So we have a list of IOCs up here, and we have a list of actions. Match which action to the different IOCs. What are they performing? So you could see who's logged in, what process ID, percent of CPU, percent of memory, all the good stuff for everything, when it was started, time, all that stuff. But the most interesting part is probably here under command, right? So we have persistence, change permissions, viewing SSH key, payload delivery, or exfiltration. If you get something like this on the exam, your best bet might be to take the low-hanging fruit first, right? Let's rule a couple things out. We have cat right here, and it's looking at a .ssh RSA1. So I'm probably looking at displaying, because I'm not actually adding anything onto this. There's no extra stuff over here. So this will just display. So I would say this first thing is viewing an SSH key. The rest of them are all netcat. Okay, so except for this guy, right? chmod 777. Oh, well, I know chmod is changing permissions, and we're giving permission to everyone to do whatever they want with the etc password file. Probably not a great thing. So we have netcat and a bunch of letters, and then 4444. We have netcat-L 4484 with a little greater than sign pointing towards A. And we have netcat LV1234 with a less than sign pointing back towards our port for the etc password file. So what are we trying to do? Well, this greater than and this less than sign are for directing output. And this, we're just listening with verbose and port and all that good stuff. So if we're only listening, I'm going to call that persistence in this case. Could delivering a payload that would be input into the file A be persistence? Yes, I could see it being a little bit as well as persistence there, but this is really delivering a payload. We're delivering something into a file on a target system that we're running this netcat on. So we could also say, hey, netcat, as soon as you get a connection on 1234, just upload that etc password file to us that we set our permissions on up here. That way I can get that file and start cracking. There's another file I would need to crack those passwords, which is the etc shadow file, right? But we haven't uploaded it here. That would have been a good idea for me to put it on the next line, but maybe next time. So here's kind of a color-coded version of what these things are. So we're viewing the SSH key up here with cat. We're using chmod here to change the permissions of a file. We're using netcat on this just to listen on this port. That would give us persistence because we could connect to this netcat listener and possibly make it do things for us because we have a connection to that computer. We have netcat listen on port 4484 with the output directed towards A. So that would be delivering a payload. And netcat-LV1234. And as soon as we get a connection on this, we are going to upload the etc password file. What tool would we use to look up TTPs for a known APT? Would that be Nmap, Nessus, MITRE, or Graylog? What tool would we use to look up TTPs for a known APT? Lots of acronyms. Nmap, Nessus, MITRE, or Graylog? If you said the MITRE, ATT, and CK, you're right. So MITRE, ATT, and CK is a database and a tool that lists APTs and their apparent goals along with their common TTPs, which stands for Tactics, Techniques, and Procedures. This also provides other data. It tells us things like this APT likes to focus on financial institutions, and this one seems to be just happy going after industrial solutions. This one doesn't like oil companies, so they mess with those guys. Nmap Support Scanner, we use it all the time. It's a great tool. Nessus is a vulnerability scanner. Again, another great tool. Both of these are free to, well, actually, I'm not sure about Greylog, but I know the other three are free. For full access, you can go play with them. I would highly recommend it. It helps you understand what kind of outputs you would likely see in the real world. Nessus is great for identifying vulnerabilities. I've scanned all my own computers. Nmap, I've also scanned my own computers to see what ports are open. Playing with these things is helpful. It may not be required to pass the exam, but it would definitely help you. And if you're comfortable using them, it's going to be that much easier for you. Question 5. What would be the best choice if we are hardening a system that currently only requires a password to access? Would we replace that password with a password and a PIN? Would we require a password and a challenge question specific to the user? Would we use a retina scan and a fingerprint instead? Would we use a key fob and a text message TOTP? Would we use geofencing? Or would we use a key fob and a PIN? So we currently have a system that requires only a password. So we type our password in, boom, we're in the system. We can do whatever we need to do. What would be the best choice if we want to harden this system? If you said use a key fob and a PIN, you're correct. You want to use multi-factor authentication. In this case, it's really just two-factor authentication, right? But multi-factor, two-factor, a key fob, which is something you have, and a PIN, which is something you know, are definitely better than just a password on its own. We could use a retina scan and a fingerprint, but these are both things that I am. I could require a password and a PIN, but these are both things I know. A password and a challenge question specific to the user, again, things I know. A key fob and a text message, well, I have the key fob and I have my phone. That doesn't do anything. Geofencing, it just says, yep, you're here. Just let them in. Someone's here. So clearly, our best choice here would be using a key fob and a PIN. Warrior noticed that the company's website has been defaced, so the IRT is working on identifying the root cause. If this takes longer than normal, what metric may change? Is that the MTTD, the MTTR, the TOTP, or the OSSTMM? If you think the acronym is long, you should see what it stands for. If you said MTTD, you'd be completely right. Mean time to detect, or MTTD, measures the average period between the beginning of an incident and the amount of time it takes for the organization to identify the issue. The MTTR, which we've probably heard before in Security Plus, is the mean time to respond or remediate. Again, this has like 4 different meanings by now. In the context of CySA, I assume they can't put MTTR just by itself. They kind of have to give you some context at this point. It has too many meanings. But the MTTR, or the mean time to respond or remediate, is the average time required to return a system to operational condition after receiving notification of a failure or cyber attack. the amount of time it takes an organization to neutralize an identified threat or failure within their network environment. So these definitions are both very, very similar, but it could be a failure, it could be a cyber attack, it could be a threat or failure within the network environment. So a failure or cyber attack doesn't necessarily have to be within our network environment. It could be on a production machine somewhere. Production machine might be in our network, but it's not like a switch or a router going down, is what I'm thinking when I think network environment usually. TOTP is a time-based one-time password, right? That would be something that we could get maybe on our phone or something similar. And OSSTMM, Open Source Security Testing Methodology Manual. I told you it was a mouthful. Question 7. If we have signed a contract with a client and the contract states that 99.9% of service requests will be responded to in less than 24 hours, what is this statement an example of? Is that an SLA? Is that an SLI? Is it an SLO? Is it SOAP? Or is it REST? If we've signed a contract with a client and in the contract states that 99% of service requests will be responded to in less than 24 hours, what kind of statement is that? Where we're saying we will respond to those service requests 99% of the time within 24 hours. Is that an SLA, an SLI, an SLO, SOAP, or REST? If you said SLO, you'd be completely correct. So the contract itself is going to be the SLA, the service level agreement, right? That's the thing we sign, and we have things inside this that are service level objectives. These are things that we're going to achieve. The objective here is that 99% of service requests will be responded to in less than 24 hours. If you've ever worked a help desk position, or maybe you've worked in a factory and it's you have like a giant TV on the wall that just has like how we're doing today, 30 days since Joe lost a finger in the machine, and you know what? We're running at 98% uptime today, or we've answered 99% of the calls within 24 hours, or we've not kept anyone waiting longer than 15 minutes. These are all service level indicators. How are we doing? This is our feedback from our system telling us, hey, you're doing a good job, or hey, you need to pick it up. Looking at the SLIs can tell us how well we're performing in comparison to what our SLA contractual obligations are. And those obligations are known as service level objectives, right? So this is all in the 003 exam. Definitely need to know the difference between these. We have SOAP and REST. These are both APIs. They are objectives in the 002, but not in the 003. So I'm trying to keep it still relevant to both exams a little bit, because the 002 doesn't expire until, I want to say probably about October, if I had to guess. October, November is probably when they're going to roll the 003 out and close out the 002. All right. Question 8. The company's API utilizes a built-in database and multiple threads to access the database to keep response times at a reasonable level. What kind of memory is the database? Is it a heap? Is it a stack? Is it a ROM? Or is it an EEPROM? Our API utilizes a built-in database and multiple threads to access the database to keep response times at a reasonable level. What kind of memory is the database? Is it heap memory? Is it stack memory? Is it ROM? Or is it EEPROM? If you said heap, you're absolutely right. Heap memory is used by all parts of an application, even across multiple threads. Stack memory is used by a single thread in the application. ROM, which is read-only memory, databases are usually read from and written to while we're using them. And EEPROM, that's a throwback to my college days. We had this machine that you'd actually put a chip in. It had a little window on it. And if you shined UV light into that window, you could erase the chip. And you'd have to reprogram it. So you'd see these people with chips with a little piece of electrical tape over the top so the UV light couldn't get in and erase their program while they were doing their demonstration. Question 9. Andy uses 3DS to encrypt a report to a client before sending it. Later that week, it has been found that the report was intercepted and the data was leaked. What is this an example of? Is that a lack of a salt? Is it a lack of a pepper? Is it poor password choice? Or is it cryptographic failure? We used 3DES to encrypt a report to a client before sending it. And the report was intercepted and the data was leaked. What would have fixed it? Could we have used a salt? Should we have used a pepper? Should we have used a stronger password? Or is this cryptographic failure? If you said it's cryptographic failure, you're correct. Since 3DES is an older and weaker encryption, it is easier to break. It is not cryptographically sound, right? We don't use it. Andy's choice here cost the customer the confidentiality of the document Andy was sending to them. A new version of Windows is released where, regardless of the user type, being guest or a normal user or an admin, a user can save into the system folders and even copy over existing files. What is this an example of? Is that privilege escalation, privilege creep, broken access control, or is this just the way things should work? A new version of Windows is released, where regardless of user type, a user can save into system folders and even copy over existing system files. What is this an example of? Is that privilege escalation, privilege creep, broken access control, or the way things should work? If you said broken access control, you're absolutely right. You definitely don't want someone, just anyone, being able to edit system files. And if we have access control in place, which Windows normally does with Active Directory, we would have to ask ourselves, what's going on here? Why does everyone have access to this stuff? It should only be the system administrator who should be able to change system files around. privilege escalation, technically partially right, but we're not talking about actually escalating our privilege. We're just saying by default everyone has this ability. So if you said privilege escalation, let's say you get like 25, 50% credit somewhere in there. Privilege creep is when we gradually accumulate more access rights beyond what we need to do our job. So if someone was moved from one position to another position to help with an abundance of work in the second position, and then moved back, but the privileges given to do their work in that second position were not revoked, they would have privilege creep. They have extra permissions that they do not need to do their current job. And this definitely isn't just the way things should work. Hopefully you found these 10 questions useful in your studies, and I hope to see you next week when we should have between 5 and 10 more questions to go over. Thanks, have a good week and a good weekend.